Welcome to our final panel on career dialogues and Mind Matters, which is careers in psychology. We started this morning, I was telling our panel members, we started at 9:30 a.m. and we set quite the context about what an interconnected world we are living in. And it couldn't be a bigger time at this point when, something like the pandemic, which has touched so many lives and brought us together, and this whole feeling, as I started this morning, that I literally feel the world is shrunk in its real terms, that it no longer feels like the world is such a huge place. Everybody seems to be so connected, so intrinsically on something like this. So I just hope everybody is safe and well. And on that note, we will start this afternoon's panel on psychology, careers in psychology, presented from Career Dialogues. We have today a fantastic and very diverse panel who I'm very excited to introduce, and I won't take too much time, but let's dive in. We have Dr. Ashley Whittington-Barnish. She joins us from Chicago. She is the Associate Professor and Chair of the Applied Behavior Analysis Department at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And she's also completed recently her 4-year term as a board member of the Illinois Association of Behavior Analysis. Thank you so much, Ashley. At 6 a.m. to do this on a weekend is phenomenal. We are deeply grateful and indebted. We have Dr. Abhijit Nadkarni, who joins us, and Dr. Abhijit is the co-director of the Addictions Research Group at Sangat, and he's the Associate Professor of Global Mental Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, an addiction psychiatrist conducting research aimed at developing and evaluating interventions for alcohol use disorders in low-resource settings. Most of Dr. Nadkarni's work is based out of Sangat, a research NGO in Goa. Thank you so much for joining. I'm in awe of the work that Sangat does, and we had the absolute privilege of hosting Dr. Vikram Patel around the same time last year to address our students to hear about all the work that Sangat is doing. So thank you so much for joining us. We have Parveen Shalk. She is the head of outreach and collaborations at Empower, which is an Aditya Birla Education Trust initiative. A psychologist by profession, and she's got diverse experience across all mediums of psychological interventions, and she's worked in education and development sector for 20+ years. So thank you so much, Parveen. We're relying a lot on your insight and experience to help young students, particularly today. Thank you so much for joining. Anusnigdha, our Kriya faculty, she is a visiting assistant professor of psychology at Kriya. Anu did her PhD in psychoanalytic studies from the University of Essex in the UK, and she's also the associate fellow of the Higher Ed Academy, the AFHEA from the UK. Thank you, Anu. Thanks for always carrying the flag for Kriya when it comes to psychology. Thank you so much. And our final panelist and powerhouse is Dr. Sonia Soni, and she's the head career guidance at the Aditya Birla World Academy. And Sonia is a clinical psychologist and a counselor, and an excellent one at that, which I can vouch for personally, with over 16 years of experience. She graduated from the Delhi University in psychology, received her doctorate in 2012, and she pursued her passion in career guidance, and also completed courses from the UCLA and the Harvard University. So thank you so much to the panelists for joining us. We'll keep this afternoon absolutely conversational, free-flowing. And what we are trying to do through Career Dialogues is this. I mean, 1 hour and plus is just not enough to look at this whole space of psychology, the complex layers it has. So we'll try and peel it little by little to kind of navigate some of the big questions that some of the students and the parents will actually have. And I'll come around, with the panel to asking for some responses. So if I can probably start first with you, Abhijit, in this sense. Are you noticing, is there like this sudden resurged growth in the interest of psychology? And is this speaking, are you seeing this sudden, as a person who's been in and out here? And what do you think is actually driving some of this interest? Your thoughts, please. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, before I do that, thanks, Kala, for having me on this panel. I think it's an interesting group of people that you managed to put together on this panel, and I'm a bit of an insider outsider on this panel. An outsider because I'm a psychiatrist. Insider, I think, because I work very closely with a lot of wonderful psychologists in my team, both in India and in the UK. So I have a bit of a insider's perspective, but at the same time, I might not have as much of a nuanced perspective on the career as the others on this panel might have. But to answer your question, whether things are changing and why they might be changing, I think they are. I mean, I've seen in India an increasing interest in the field of psychology from the time that I started first started doing my post-graduation here in India and then subsequent career. And then after I returned to India from the UK a few years ago. And although this is not empirical, I mean, why this might have changed, these are just some observations that I have. And I think it's both to do with changes in the demand and supply, I would say. The changes in demand are predominantly because of a greater understanding of the larger field of mental health by people. I think younger people are a lot more these days, are a lot more attuned towards psychology, mental health, behavior, whatever you might want to call it. So there's an increasing interest, there's an increasing exposure to what's out there, which would not have been the case maybe say 20 years or so ago. So an increasing awareness of the possibilities of what one could do in this larger field, and so that's kind of along with the advances of science or in the science of psychology, so to say, this is increasing the demand for this career, but also at the same time the supply has also changed. I mean, it's changed from the time when people could just go do their BA psychology and then MA/MSc in psychology in India, and that would be the end of it. Some of them would probably go on to do some clinical work, and many would not know where to go from there. That's changed quite a lot in terms of not just opening up vistas in India, but I mean outside of India as well. There's a lot more clarity. There's a lot more availability of courses. There's a lot more variability in terms of the different things that people can do in psychology. And the world has opened up for people as well. It's not just about doing courses in India. People are able and willing to go overseas and do their training, be their master's training or doctoral training, etc. So there have been changes both on the demand side and the supply side, and then that is kind of to a certain extent driving this growing interest in psychology as a career amongst young people.
Thank you. Sonia, if I could get your thoughts a bit about, are you seeing that huge surge with the many batches of students and young students, and are you seeing some of that interest?
Sure.
In psychology?
Thanks, Kala. Yeah, so I get that question, and I think I would just take the extension from what Dr. Abhijit has spoken about. And what we've started seeing is that a lot of students.
So Parveen, we'll move to you, and I'm sure Sonia will come back. So just your hat and your observations on that front, please.
So, Kala, what I feel is there are 2-3 things. One is the demand versus supply, as Dr. Nadkarni very clearly said. Second is the profession itself. It's so fascinating, and there are so many transferable skills. So not even if I do not want to go for a master's program and practice psychology, I know if I do a undergraduate program, that direct transferable skills, right from analytics, technology, communication, content writing. So what I also have seen across the 22 years of working when I counsel students is, even if they're not clear of becoming a mental health professional or a psychologist or anything, they understand that doing that degree, understanding human behavior, understanding how humans function, it's very exciting, and that application is there across many fields. So that is what is exciting. Of course, the awareness is much, much more now. And I want to bring out this, we have a very fascinating centennial generation going on right now. I love this generation. They are so passionate, they are so empathetic. They want to explore, they want to, they're hustlers. So for them, it works with that generation really well. So basically, awareness about psychology, the passion about the subject, the interesting subject that it is, and the transferable skills which the subject provides for other fields as well. And that, according to me, has, caused the surge or caused the interest towards psychology more than what it was some years back.
Fabulous. Sonia, yes, sure, please. We have you, so that'll be great too.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I think my internet is lagging, so apologies for that. So when we talk about the shift in the mindset of students specifically, and that's more important for me to be analyzing from the point of view of a career counselor, it's also a realization that a lot of students have started realizing the niche it's bringing to them. What Parveen and Abhijit both pointed out here was that they've started recognizing the fact that psychology may not be a career of their choice in itself, but it's an added advantage which even helps them to get into the aspect of transferable skills, A, B, pick up skills of empathy which they learn over the course of time. One of the biggest factors to do that is a shift in the nature of the subject, which made it move from being called a pure humanities to a science discipline, where everything has an empirical understanding to it. There is a research-based foundation to the subject, and everything that you're learning today as a student has some sound recognition and resonates with the principles of other natural sciences. And that's a realization which has helped students to recognize, A, B, also celebrate the aspect of return on investments. My grade 11th and 11th and 12th graders are more like businessmen who think about choosing the right subjects because they want to be understanding how it's going to be paying them back in the future. And specifically when they're looking at education, whether it's India or overseas, they would like to do psychology if it's liberal arts, because they know it's going to help them in the longer run when it's the real game of life. And it's if I have to put it in a nutshell, it's more of an idea that we have started putting, that humans are beyond a machinery, and psychology helps them to understand that tailor-made advantage of the environment they belong to. So definitely, Kala, there is a shift, and the shift is because psychology has finally being given the space it was with the other natural sciences, based on the fact that it lies on experimentation, observation and research, rather than just pop psychology and hearsay psychology.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Anu, do you want to just comment a bit about the time that you left to study to here? So is that the difference, comparable difference that you're seeing when one could look at a decade?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I was applying for universities, and I knew I wanted to do psychology, but I was one of the rarer few that knew that. Most people took psychology because they didn't get the course of their choice. It was a second option. There's also a huge gender disparity from what I've seen, especially in Delhi University, because psychology was only available at women's colleges. Boys did not have a lot of option to study psychology. And coming back to say, it's like Dr. Abhijit mentioned, it's demand and supply, and there's a lot more courses available at a lot more universities, and it's being given that recognition. So it's great to see the students interested in pursuing psychology as well. And from what I've noticed, like Parveen mentioned, that this generation is, they want to seek out new things. They want to understand things. And I think the surge of the globalization with the internet and social media and stuff, it gives them exposures to mental health issues that are being acknowledged abroad. People without stigma can say, I'm having issues, I need help. And this is, leading them to ask a lot of questions. And I've seen personally with the students here at CREA, they have an urge to know why something is happening and how they can help. And I think this is inherent to this Gen Z generation that is coming up, that they want to help, they are empathetic, and and they have the option to learn how to do it without, falling into the traditional methods of I want to be a doctor or an engineer or something like that. And I think that's great that these changes are taking place in India. And, especially given the pandemic situation, mental health is being talked about a lot more, and, it's driving the forefront of research right now. And I think we're going to see a lot more interest in psychology over the next few years.
Yeah, that's so rightly put. The whole dialogue of public health, mental health seems to go along with it and not really separated at every discussion forum. So that's interesting. You touched a bit on the global. So we've had this understanding of India, and I really want to take this a little bit of understanding on the international area. So Ashley, if I can defer this to you in terms of the international context, what have you seen in a decade happen to the study of psychology itself? And particularly, are there some branches that you didn't think were as popular that have started to, gain precedence? Because I remember when all the crime shows that came about, when HBO first came, everybody wanted to do forensic psychology. Everybody thought they were going to solve crimes with the help of psychology. So Ashley, some of your thoughts on that front?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me as part of the panel. It's been so interesting already to hear everyone's perspectives, and I agree so much about the importance. Internationally, I think it's very similar. I think to your point, with the pandemic impacting and really having hopefully reduced stigma around seeking help and mental health. I think also just diversification of knowing that there are different pathways in psychology, and understanding that there can be, be different careers with slightly different backgrounds, and that they are unique paths. My background initially is in school psychology, so I worked in the school system with young children, and then the department that I work in now is in behavior analysis, and we primarily work with those with autism spectrum disorder. I train students that are working in that path, and more much more concrete, observable behavior science in that area. And then at the Chicago School, there are programs in forensic psychology and all of those. And so I do see, even just in, what the reach of the Chicago School is in the US, and then also for international students across many countries, just more and more programs and options available, and education that there are some different ways to study international psychology. It's I think even maybe 20 years ago, it was so much more focused just on clinical psychology in the US. And now realizing that that's still a pathway, of course, and there also are all these other ways and directions. And I agree with everyone too about the excitement of kind of the next generation coming in and wanting to explore some of these other areas, and being recognized, psychology being recognized more as a behavioral science, and more research and observation, and how that can help the field too.
Yeah. So Abhijit, if I can just defer to you on what's happening with your hat that you wear in the UK as well. Any kind of branches that you think were not really discussed a decade ago that we're beginning to talk a little bit more actively now? Are you on mute?
Sorry. Yeah. So not so much as branches that were spoken about earlier that are spoken about much more now. It's more about the same branches, but the options that people see for those same branches. That's kind of increasing. So people moving on from this traditional interpretation of what a psychologist did or should be doing has moved on to the opening up of various different other avenues for this. So for example, my work is predominantly in the global mental health field, and we have psychologists who do the global mental health degree and work as researchers. We have our psychologists working as program coordinators. indicators. So it's not just about the traditional interpretation of what a psychologist could and could not do. It's as one of the panelists said, I mean, it provides you with a lot of transferable skills which could be used outside of the larger mental health field, but even within the mental health field in various different ways. And that's the kind of change that I am seeing in the UK. Within the larger global mental health space that I kind of inhabit, but also in India, there's a greater understanding of the various different things that one could do beyond traditional psychology professions, and some of that is I see is reflected in the questions as well in the text box, which I'm sure we're going to kind of deal with later. But there was seems to have disappeared, but a question about economics and the intersectionality between economics and psychology. I think these are the kind of things that are opening up now to people.
Yeah, we'll be coming to that. Yeah, absolutely. And what I thought is one way of doing, going to the next round is about talking about the different branches of psychology. But I thought this diverse group in itself probably brings in so much more to talk about this than us having to talk about everything popular. So I thought I might just go around asking about your particular area of specialization and why did you pick that? What does it actually do? So Anu, if I can just ask you a bit about your area of psychoanalytics, what exactly is it? What kind of drove you to that spot?
So as you mentioned, my area of expertise is within psychoanalytic studies, and within that I'm doing, I'm focusing on gender and sexual minorities and psychoanalytic therapy and the implications for minority groups seeking therapy in predominantly heterosexual society and stuff. So my area, why I chose psychoanalysis was because I always wanted to know why people work the way they do, right? And when I was growing up, that was not an option to understand why. And psychology was the closest I could find. And when I was doing my undergrad, we had a lot of scientific basis, right? We had experiments that we conducted, we did tests, we tried to measure intelligence, personality, memory, perception, all of these aspects were covered. But I sort of felt that there was still an aspect of the people that we were doing these experiments with that was not measured in these behavioral sciences, these hard scientific experiments that we were doing. And in our third year, we covered psychoanalysis a little bit in Freud and the unconscious. And that sort of struck with me, the fact that everyone has an unconscious that is guiding their behaviors, things you don't remember, but might be affecting you. And it gave me a more sort of holistic understanding of people, which I tried and focused on researching.
Yeah. Sonia, if I could ask you a bit about your area and what drove you to the education space? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, my background is clinical psychology, and I did my master's with clinical. And when I started working in the clinical space, which I have worked for 5 years before I entered the school space, I realized that most of our young adults were going through depression because there was nobody to guide them to pick up the right kind of career that they would be a good fit for. And that's where my search started about that. Do I want to be working with them when they have already into the full-blown space, or can I nib it in the bud when we are making those selections? And that's how I started backtracking it. And today I feel that the advantage of the clinical field has definitely helped me to gain sense with the empathy and the transferable skills, what we've spoken about, about how the counseling happens. And I'm working at the very innocent stage, as much as we can to capture and look at kids and also provide them the next home, because sometimes even working that space helps them to make the next move as a big one.
Interesting. Ashley, your area, if you want to talk through a little bit about what do you do on a regular basis?
Sure, yeah. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I started in the school psychology area in the school systems, and I work primarily with children. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and then moved into the, similarly, I moved into the academic setting, and I'm working in the university setting and as an administrator supporting students in training. I also am a clinical, I have a part-time job as a clinical director for an autism services company, so providing early intervention services to children ages 2 to 6 in behavior analysis. So really working through teaching social skills and communication at a young age to prepare them to then to kind of close the gap and move towards the school system. So those are kind of the areas in which I work right now.
Interesting. Yes, and we'll come back to that. Abhijit, that's quite a very niche specific area that you work in. So it'd be lovely to hear how that journey happened.
Sure. So as you mentioned right at the outset, I wear several hats. So one is that of a psychiatrist, a clinical psychiatrist, and more specifically addiction psychiatrist. So that's kind of the hat where I do a little bit of individual practice these days, seeing individual patients, but that's a very small part of the work that I do. I'm largely now, my current bigger hat that I wear is that of an epidemiologist, which is someone who examines and understands the distribution of disease in populations and why people develop certain kind of illnesses and what we can do about it. And within that, my specialization is in global mental health, which is again a relatively very new manifestation, so to say, of the larger mental health space. So this is the global mental health space is a field where we kind of looking at the discrepancies or the variations in the presentation of mental illness across populations in various parts of the world, the intersectionalities between culture and mental health. And then all of this is done at a population level. So this is not about individual level care. This is about understanding mental health at the levels of population and trying to solve the issues related to mental health at a population level. So why do populations have reduced access to mental health care? What are the barriers which stop people from accessing mental health care? What are the facilitators of mental health care access? And if there are barriers and then big treatment gaps, what can we do? Or what are the innovative solutions to increase access to mental health care for people at a population level, but not an individual level, and which then intersects with policy making, which intersects with increasing access to care by scaling up services, etc. So if you were to ask me, in a nutshell, basically, this is mental health at a population level and not at an individual patient level.
Interesting. And you know, we're going to come to the next round a bit about some of those interfaces that you touched on. Parveen, if we can have your feedback a bit about what drove you into this space and your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Kala. So I've been lucky. I've had a varied journey. So, I started with health psychology and rehabilitation psychology, where I worked with the patients who are suffering from acute chronic, diseases and who had to be rehabilitated, helped in a hospital, in a home setup, in a hospice setup. That was my first initial years. Obviously, my love is career counseling. So I've spent 17 years in career counseling, right from, and when you say career counselor, people think a person who counsels about careers, but within career counseling, I have done assessment, created assessments, looked at content of career counseling, created counseling methods. It's a whole range of things you could do in career counseling and educational counseling, universities, checking with the universities, the admission counseling, part of that. Of course, then the social development sector, there's a lot to do over there. So I worked in the social development sector, creating, interventions, training programs for the government level schools and teachers and, government level staff. Then the organizational sector, I worked with developing MDPs, worked for organizational effectiveness, assessments in organizational sector, and currently in mental health. trying to make it mainstream, trying to stamp out the stigma and create, work with a bunch of mental health professionals to promote that. So I've been across all this, and all these fields have so many sub-fields. So if you're interested, you can take so many things within each field. It's just exciting.
That's great. I mean, yeah, and the passion with each one of you actually come with is quite, because I think that's the first thing, right? You need to have the heart and mind in this particular space. So I'm going to come around a bit about, at the core of it, and I say this as a parent of a child who's pursuing, who's a training psychologist as well in another part of the world. It's the most exciting, but it's also a very challenging study, and it's really complex, and it's got its challenges as well. So Ashley, if I can defer this question to you and ask you, in your work, I mean, working with children with autism and everything that you do around the behavior analysis, I mean, what's the most exciting and what's been most challenging? And hence, if somebody as a psychology major wants to work in the kind of the behavioral therapy area that you're kind of working about, what should be the kind of skills that they should come equipped with besides whatever that's academic?
Great, those are great questions. I think for me, one of the things is it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding to see children who maybe had a difficult time communicating or talking, then master those goals and working with those families. So it's very rewarding on that clinical side. It's also rewarding more when in my academic role to similarly see those different skills come into play, and to start to click and make sense for the students, and to see them go out in the world and make a difference, and to see what our grads go out and do, and what amazing work they're doing in different areas would be the most rewarding. Most challenging, I think, from a student perspective, a lot of students, I primarily work with graduate level students, so master's and doctoral level students, and I think sometimes that jump into graduate level studies can be really challenging for students, and understanding that it's no longer just trying to get through different courses, but everything really builds on itself as you start to specialize more and more. So I think that's often a challenge for students. A challenge for me personally, I think I have a lot of interest, so trying to probably, like many of the panelists, trying to figure out what's most reinforcing at any given moment and working in that area. And kind of going from there and trying to make a difference in the world, in the space that I can, with the time that I have in that area too.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks for the perspective. We'll come back to one of those points you mentioned. Sonia, if I could just get your reflections around your role itself as a career counselor and working with students looking to make career choices. So what is the most rewarding and what's the most challenging aspect of it? And again, what are the top skills that you think that come to front when you are performing your role?
Sure. Thanks, Kala. So when we talk about career counseling, as Parveen spoke, it's not just about guiding the student to the university. I think that's the last thing which is in my mind or on my head. For me, it's a journey, and that's something that we believe as a school. So whatever I would be talking has got to do a lot with the schools from where I come, because we are very, very high on inclusive education, and it's a place for all. It's not just a place for the ones who want to be kinds, but everybody. So for us, it's a journey, and we are working very, very closely with families. So one of the top skills for me as a career counselor would be that you have to be empathetic, A. B, you have to learn sometimes to take a stand and be the devil's advocate. Because what's happening is that kids are not realistic of judging their capabilities. And when I say judging, it's not something which should be taken in a negative connotation, but it is something that there has to be a realistic understanding of the best fit. The idea over here as a career counselor should be also to work alongside on the concept of best fits rather than rankings. Rankings do matter. It really matters to say that, hey, I'm a graduate out of Harvard, but at the end of the day, what matters is in the real life, your career and your happiness quotient coming out of that is what's more important. So sometimes to have a very, very unbiased opinion for each and every student is of prime importance. So in a nutshell, if I have to talk about the top 5 skills that a career counselor needs, A, empathy, to recognize and realize that all 5 fingers are never the same, but all 5 fingers have equal importance in the long run. The second skill is keeping yourself abreast with the knowledge that's going around in the university. So you should be an avid reader. I think that's a skill that a lot of us don't enjoy, but that is a skill, reading and being an absorb. And third is definitely what all of us would be as a counselor and as a psychologist. You have to be a very good listener. The power to hear and understand is the uttermost, because sometimes in my career counseling session, I pick up a kid who needs more of a pastoral care, and I have to hand over that kid to the pastoral care team at work rather than the career counseling, because amid all that conversation that's going on, there is also a lot of worry about something, that anxiety, which may be for us very, very momentary, but it's also an indication that the child needs help. So these 3 skills would be the one that would be the uttermost important. And one of the skills which I could tell you would be easy, that if you should not be a career counselor, if you think you're not patient, because career counseling is all about patience, hand-holding families, and especially if you're working in India. At the end, on my graduation, I believe that I have got a family graduated, not a kid alone, because you have to learn to deal with parents alongside too.
Absolutely. That was just going to come to that about, how you have to switch your hat from talking to the child and suddenly you have to appeal to what the parent actually wants. So yes, Abhijit, I want to ask you this, and because you sit in that different paradigm of, your work around the addictions bit, slightly the young adults or a little bit more senior. So, and hence in that space, what's been most challenging and rewarding? And is there some things that's really skill-based that you think comes into forefront?
I think a lot of the things that have already been spoken about, because those are generic clinical skills or client-centered skills that every good clinician or every good mental health professional, every good psychologist should have. Things like empathy, listening skills, etc. And you can't do away with that. That's the foundation on which the rest of your house, so to say, as a professional, mental health professional is built. But if we to kind of look more specifically at addictions, other than that, I think the big challenge in the space in India is our own mindsets around addictions, and then how addictions are perceived by society, and where do you draw your mental health professionals from? Where do you draw your psychologists? Where do you draw your psychiatrists from? In the very society that we live in. And so some of the prejudices, some of the stigma and some of the understanding of addictions that the society holds, and these erroneous beliefs about addictions are carried by some of these professionals. So for example, the stigma related to addictions, the belief that addictions are to do with your self-control, and if you don't have enough self-control, you end up with problems with addictions, etc. And I think the big challenge is to be able to kind of overcome these prejudices, these beliefs in your practice. And I think a big role a big role is played by your training as well as the supervision that you get when you go about in doing your practice. So that's more or less the specific thing that I would say about addictions. But other than that, the core skills that you require as any mental health professional who does clinical work remain the same.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly, while I have you there, also address the elephant in the room, which is psychiatry versus psychologist. And this is like, it's a classic debate. Is one bigger than the other? Can one live without the other? There's too much of debate going on. So do you want to just, in very simple layman terms for a 12th standard, what's psychiatry and what's psychology?
Okay, both are mental health professionals. I'm just going about clinical psychology or counseling psychology. Okay, I'm not about the other kind of subfields of psychology. So looking at psychologists who work in the clinical field and psychiatrists, both are mental health professionals. The difference being that psychiatrists have a medical degree before they go on to do their specialization in mental health, which means that they can prescribe medications for mental health problems, whereas psychologists cannot. Psychiatrists might or might not be trained to deliver psychological interventions. I mean, it's not an given that just because you're a psychiatrist, you know how to deliver psychological treatments. Mostly in India, the training of psychiatrists is such that you don't really have a formal structured training and supervision to deliver psychological interventions. If you're trained abroad or overseas, you might be. So for example, I am trained to do psychological interventions, although I'm a psychiatrist. So you might have psychiatrists who can only prescribe medications, or you might have psychiatrists who can prescribe medications and psychological treatments. Clinical psychologists provide psychological treatments. They're trained to do psychological treatments. And even within that, in India, there is this, to a certain extent, dichotomy. And because there's a lack of clarity in terms of who is qualified to deliver psychological intervention. So according to the law, so to say, you have to have an MPhil or a PhD, or you have to be registered with the Rehabilitation Council of India to be legally able to provide psychological treatments. But if you look at the space, most of the times it's people with a master's degree in psychological treatments who might have done some courses, etc., who will be delivering psychological interventions. Question about who is more important, in my head, that's not a question at all. I think it's an equal partnership. Although you might turn around and say that's not a reality on the ground. I completely accept that's not a reality on the ground, but the way it should be is that it's an equal partnership. One can't do without the other, because as I said, I mean, neither of the two are able to holistically provide all kinds of care to a person with mental health problems. So it has to be a teamwork. Both are equally important. And personally, if you ask me my personal experience in the work that I do, in the big team that I have within Sangha, the Addictions Research Group, I'm the only psychiatrist. There are more psychologists I have in the team than psychiatrists. In the larger Sangha team, I mean, there's just two, Vikram and myself, the two psychiatrists. I mean, a lot of the other mental health professionals are psychologists. So that tells you a lot where the power lies in at least our organization.
That's great. That's good. So that clarifies the questions that did come. So Parveen, I'm going to come to you and tag another question a bit. I mean, your space, you've traversed, as you said, you've done a lot of roles. One, of course, is, as we are continuing the current question of what's really exciting about what you do, but also, where do you see the psychology interface with so many other disciplines? And I'm quite interested in your take on that, and where do you see those interfaces in your own work, or where do you see that happening more, psychology with any other discipline as well?
So currently, Kala, I feel psychology with technology. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting, because when I was started as a psychologist and started working in a hospital, I never thought that I had to do any research or, any analysis, data analysis, whatever, which I had to do in late 1999 when I started working. And currently, when I see the interface of psychology and technology, so I see that there are so many apps, and there are so many various kinds of apps which require a very high input of a technologist plus a very high input of a psychologist. So, 10 years back, you never thought, I want to do engineering, but I also like psychology. But now you can think of that. You can think that, okay, I'm technologically inclined, yet I want to study psychology, and how can I get that together? Because, user interface design, the app development, the content which goes in the app, there are so many lovely apps, and, it's not that I'm promoting anything, but the point is this whole combination currently is where one of the interfaces which I see is coming up. Second is organizational psychology. Initially, there was human resource manager doing everything, mostly recruitments, mostly handling payrolls. Okay. But now if you look at the business psychology aspect, okay, right from organizational effectiveness to human, to recruitments, to leadership development, to change management, succession management, psychological counselors, organization psychologists are an integral part of a business. Even strategy nowadays, even in strategy, then economics, right? Somebody asked a question, what is the combination? Policy making. When a psychologist is involved in policy making from the development sector, you look at any big NGO, any international NGO, in their panel of policy making, program making, they have an input of a clinical psychologist, educational psychologist, rehabilitation psychologist. So these, and they are only growing. When I started working, I know that, okay, I'll go to a clinic, I was aspiring to open my clinic and start my counseling. But how my career only has grown shows how the different interfaces are working with each other, right? From technology, organizational, developmental, and educational. I mean, like every school, every college, you require not just a career counselor, but a career psychologist. Somebody, like Dr. Soni said, it's not about giving a course, it's about understanding the whole thing for the child. It's become very important. So all these interfaces I feel are, and technology being my most favorite. So
in that interface. Interesting. Yeah, we were just running a poll question as well, asking where do you see the most alignment. This morning, we had a very leading digital marketer with us on one of the economics panel, and he said increasingly they're looking at economics with psychology candidates to actually look at digital marketing, which is kind of an exciting space. So Anu, if I could just bring this to you in terms of, and this could be in the context of Kriya as well, but where do you see that the increasing interface, if you like? I know psychology is all pervasive, it's everywhere, but if you actually say these are some of the big problems we face, and this is increasingly where psychology is going to interface with some disciplines, what would be your pick?
Sorry. Like Parveen mentioned, technology is a huge aspect where it is going. Not only apps, because apps right now are doing well, especially with a lot of students, and with the social isolation, it offers a sort of help that face-to-face interactions would not or could not go there. But a lot of artificial intelligence aspects as well, machine learning, computer sciences. There's a lot of research that is ongoing and generating right now. So I think technology and psychology and human cyber interface is a big aspect that will be coming up, emerging. Other than that, I've seen a huge interest in economics and psychology as well, especially in students right now. Yeah, those are the two aspects I'm seeing currently.
Interesting. And actually, with your take on that, where do you see a lot? Because I know that the Chicago school actually calls itself an interwoven psychology school or something like that, which is very, very interesting that it's, I thought for a long time it was Kriya's word, but not until I started talking to the Chicago school that you call yourselves an interwoven psychology school. So, and hence, where do you see psychology interface with some of the disciplines, and how do you manage to do that? Because I know you have a very strong behavioral economics center as well at the school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think kind of to answer in two ways. So one, I think the interdisciplinary and intereducational goals are really becoming more a forefront of all of our programs. How are you working with other stakeholders? Even if you're working as a clinical psychologist, you might be consulting or reading reports from a medical doctor or from all of these different fields, from a speech and language pathologist. And so being able to work in a space where you can collaborate, and maybe you're not working directly in that field, but at least having a working knowledge and working through that is really a concentration of all of our programs and however they interface with each other. We also have some programs that are like dual enrollment programs. So one that I'm most familiar with that I help oversee is we have a dual enrollment program where it's a master's in counseling psychology. So a master's level counselor providing really talk therapy and psychology, along with the program, the Master's of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis. So working in that space of really learning more about the philosophy and learning theories behind behavior science and how that interplays with counseling psychology. And so, and a lot of those students do go on to work, you know, with families or in hospital settings where they can really utilize both sets of those skills. And so we are seeing, you know, even within, I guess, the greater field of psychology and behavior sciences, some of these interdisciplinary opportunities where people then have even more career opportunities or more ways to really specialize and pivot within that. And I think to your point too, I don't know as much about those programs, but yes, we have behavioral economics and organizational leadership program is a doctoral program where really people have all different backgrounds and they're coming to learn more about leading and managing and like the psychology behind all of that. So really closely related to that industrial organizational psychology, but really how it can be applied across so many disciplines and fields, even people coming in with other outside backgrounds. And that happens even within our department of behavior analysis. I'll have students that come in with a background in art, with a background in physics, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, people can be specializing in so many different areas, even if their background prior to coming to the programs is different, and then they can apply it in their own way too.
Yeah, interesting. So yes, Abhijit, and I wanted to ask that because I don't know so much in your space, but much of the therapies that we're talking about, Abhijit, we're hearing a lot more about art therapy and music therapy out there. And now these are all more therapies out there, but in the natural synergy is psychology and biology. But again, Abhijit, if I can ask you that, is there any other stronger disciplines that you're seeing that the synergy is now growing intensely?
I think the ones which we already been alluded to, and I think the one which probably intersects a lot more closely with the work that I do and our group does is behavioral economics actually, and how one of the manifestations or one of the directions which it takes, including the work actually that Abhijit Banerjee starts, is looking at how economics and people's health behaviors intersect. So for example, the work that the Poverty and Action Lab does is a great example of that. And examples of studies such as the one done in Rajasthan where immunization, child immunization was increased by just giving these little bags of grains to the parents every time the child got immunized. And then this kind of intersectionality where health outcomes are improved or health behaviors are changed is for me the biggest intersection. I mean, but there are other things such as market analysis, etc., which also kind of intersect with behavioral economics. But when it comes to the health sector, I think the biggest and the closest at the moment, amongst the exciting things that are happening is the intersection with behavioral economics. Technology, of course, but that is kind of not really only specifically behavioral psychology, but there's a lot of intersection between the work that we do with technology and mental health. But if you were to ask me, one specific field which intersects greatly with and seems to have a great future, so to say, within our field, it would be economics.
Economics, okay, interesting. And if I was going to ask you a bit, there's lots of questions on sports psychology. So Abhijit, is that something that you'll be able to address a little bit about? I'm not really sure how far in India we've gotten to that. I know internationally it's quite a strong discipline out there, but it's pretty much, is this as simple as I'm passionate about sports and I know psychology? Is there something very different to pursue to become a sports psychologist?
I don't think I would be the best person to answer that question. Besides saying that it is an area of interest for our group at the moment. In fact, we are working on developing an intervention for young people, which is based on a sports platform, which is designed to prevent the initiation of substance use in young people. And that is kind of built on a sports platform. There's football clubs in Goa, etc. But also kind of trying to understand how some of the skills that young people acquire while they are playing team sports can be used as strengths or can be used to build resilience to prevent the initiation of substance use through certain mechanisms like peer pressure, etc., which is one of the commonest reasons, especially in a country like ours, where young people initiate substance use. So that is my kind of take on it. There is scope for sports and mental health to intersect, but with regards to sports psychology and the training options, etc., I don't think I'm the right person. I think I'm sure there are more experts on this panel who will be able to answer that question.
Yeah, anybody has a comment, feel free to add that. And so I'm just talking about a bit about, we've heard this across the board in terms of it's about understanding people, but it's also understanding societies and behaviors more commonly. So it cuts across all of that. And if I could just have a round of yes and no's here, and also if it's a gray, please feel free to expand why. So Parveen, if I can ask you, so studying psychology without understanding, let's say, in economics or social studies, is that going to be as effective?
No.
No. And
you want me to give a reason, or no is enough?
No, no is enough. But if you have, I mean, the fact is that we are talking about that psychology is in context of so many other things, isn't it?
You are dealing with human behavior, humans, people, and people come from varied. That knowledge helps, no? You might have the core skills of counseling and all the therapies and whatever you do, but unless you can make it relatable to your clientele or to your business or wherever you are, so how do you not have knowledge about the other domains? I mean, you may not be an expert, but you need to have knowledge about the other domains wherever you decide to work or practice.
Sonia, your field is psychology a singular disciplinarity that can exist?
So I would say probably, in my opinion, it's a yes, because initially, if you have a solid foundation in the subject, the integration of the subject becomes easier with other disciplines.
Got it. In terms of,
and I think, Kala, to your previous, to your previous question, I would just like to take an opportunity and add that what I've seen, psychology being one of the strongest discipline with other subjects are bio and chem. Back at school, I've not seen kids doing economics and psychology so much as I've seen them doing bio and chem and entering field of cognitive neurosciences, which may later lead on to what we spoke about, the financial economics understanding and stuff like that.
Got it. Yeah, interesting. And this morning, as I say, we had this economics panel and we were talking so much about behavior economics and where that interface actually lied. And Abhijit, your thoughts about can psychology, just as I'm talking about the current context for the future, can you just do it as a single discipline, or you kind of think that the need for it to interface is quite imminent?
Loud and resounding no. And the reason being that you can't really work on mental health or human behavior in isolation of the environment that people live in. And so, to give an example, if I were to have, let's look at a clinical scenario. If I'm looking at working with a patient or a client with depression, I can't, let's say, for example, one of the things that they're experiencing is oppression related to their caste. I can't be seeing that patient independent of that. I mean, you can't be treating their depression independent of the context that they live in. And that requires then an understanding of sociology as well. So there's various different intersectionalities that people need to, you can't, for example, treat common mental disorders without understanding the intersectionalities with gender. And so you need to have an understanding of gender studies. I mean, so though you can't, I mean, it's absolutely, in my opinion, it's absolutely not possible to understand psychology without understanding this. And if I were to extend it beyond that, I think it applies to all professions. It's not just psychology. I mean, I can't be a good doctor without understanding sociology, without understanding gender. And that applies to a lot of other professions. And I think that if you were to ask me, the singular failure of Indian education is the inability to bring other perspectives into the various training programs. be kind of so focused on the core content of the training that you are providing that our young students do not absolutely have. I mean, I'm sure you will say that Kriya does not do that. I'm sure it might be different from the conversations that we have had. But I mean, if we do not allow our young people to have multiple perspectives, then we are just turning them into machines or automation. Then a machine can do your job. You don't need a human being.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I guess that interdisciplinarity is what we are consistently, and we are trying to constantly bring out in the fact that you can't separate one from the other and look at anything in isolation. Ashley, your thoughts, I know you're very strong around the interdisciplinary psychology, but your thoughts about studying psychology as single discipline devoid of other influences?
I also say no. I think that it's really best. Maybe it can be done, but not in best practices. I think it's so important to learn from the research of other fields when we're talking about global space and talking about diversity and trying to meet the needs of so many individuals. It's so important to learn from other disciplines, from other areas. It's important that we, within psychology, that happens, but also from some of the other disciplines that have been talked about, sociology, from biology, chemistry, learning the lessons and taking those and carrying those over from other disciplines. So we're not just continually doing the same things and expecting different results. And we can move forward then in research and in practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anu, I'm going to, we've been flooded with quite a few questions, and I have a team's actually pulled out some interesting ones. Anu, I'm going to direct this question to you, and this is about answer to the best of your ability in terms of policy making or reform. So how does, if I as a student want to really make a reform in the system for mentally and physically disabled students, how is a psychology study going to help me? And if I'm just taking psychology, what else could I do if I wanted to really work in policy making in the physically or the mentally challenged?
So that is a big and heavy question. And it's really interesting because I attended a conference yesterday on public policy and transformations from a psychological perspective. And the thing is, policies from the central level would be politics, right? It is governance, it is law, it is all of that. And the personal is political, which is a very famous thing in psychology as well. And a psychological student studying psychology, someone with a psychological background, someone with the skills, can sort of highlight the issues that need change. So I think the primary sort of mark that you can hit is highlighting the aspects that these policies are missing. And the policies that need change, and the psychological research that we can do can sort of bring this to light as well. So, this would be a more nuanced study as opposed to someone doing law and saying this is not affecting the economics of, say, the lower caste cotton farmers in this area, right? A psychological study would be able to say, look, it's hurting their income and their mental health, increasing suicide rates, including disenfranchisement of the women and the children, leading to a migration in urban cities, leading to these other issues, right? This sort of goes to the previous questions as well. Psychology can't stand by itself. It's interwoven into sociology, economics, and politics. So policy making is an important aspect that psychology is sort of underutilized at this point, but needs further addressing. I also had a slight, very little knowledge about it, but the sports psychology question that came up earlier. So sports psychology is not merely looking at, I like sports, I like psychology, let's put them together. It's more about the factors that affect the performance skills of human beings. So if the courses that you look at, a lot of it is biological based. So it's nutrition, it's physiology, it's anatomy, it is, all of those aspects to increase performances, not just in sports, but exercises and other benefits from that aspect as well, and adding a psychological aspect to that.
Thank you.
I hope that answered the question.
Oh, that's perfectly good. No, absolutely. And I'm also assuming a lot of that specialization happens after your undergraduate, and it's often that students want to come in at the undergraduate level and want to specialize, but it's really about what you do later.
And this is something Sonia had mentioned when you'd asked the question as well. You need some core psychological skills before just interweaving it with the other aspects as well. That is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was going to ask, so this just one question about, and I want to ask,
Kala,
just given the amount of work that we need more student practitioners, young graduates too. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. Abhijit, I was just going to ask, are there some underserved areas within the psychology practice that we definitely need for more graduates to focus on? Are they overserved? Is there anything at all that comes out very stark for you?
Within clinical psychology, you mean?
Yes, within the whole realm of mental health or psychology, are we saying that there are some areas where we need a lot more practitioners, but we don't currently have as many?
All of it. All of it. Currently, there's such a severe shortage of psychology professionals in India. And then probably not because, and this is a hypothesis, not because we are not training enough. It's probably some of it is a function of the fact that you have young people kind of taking up a career in psychology or doing a bachelor's and master's in psychology, not really understanding what it is. Or you might have the alternative, which someone else on the panel spoke about earlier. You take up psychology because you don't get your first choice training option, and who then do not end up having or developing a career in psychology. So a lot of young people are lost in going down that pathway. So that's just a hypothesis. But if we just have to look at the numbers, we don't have enough in the larger group of mental health professionals in India. But again, within that also, we don't have enough psychologists in India to serve a population of about 3 billion.
Anybody wants to add anything into that in terms of any larger areas where we are underserved that you think?
So okay, Dr. Sonia, yes. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what Abhijit said is absolutely fantastic. And just to add to it, I would say that one of the areas which get ignored is school psychology and working with school children, because that's where we first start seeing the traces. Any psychological disorder which is full blown in your adulthood has some of the minor traces which would have been somewhere kind of shown in the school arena, but because our school teachers are not trained with a psychological background, some of the schools feel it's important to have maybe 5 maths teachers, but not more than 1 school counselor. So I think school counselor and the pastoral care team and the college counseling team is a team which needs to be built up equally, and we need to really invest a lot on their professional development also, because as I said, it's a hands-on learning. That's my opinion. Apart from the other fields which are there, these 2 fields often get ignored, and it's more like the run-of-the-mill kind of a thing that anybody can be a school counselor. Parveen, over to you.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So I was just wanted to bring to everybody's notice, because there are so many students, that we are a young country. So in 2020, we became the youngest country in the world, which means there are so many youth in our country. Now, if you look at research, I was just looking at some research before the panel. It says 37.7% of youth in universities suffer from moderate depression. 1 in every 4 children suffer from depression in our country. Okay, 1 in 28% will have some kind of mental health problem. So can you imagine our country's population plus 60% around is youth population, and youth are the ones who get who have mental health issues. So the dearth of professionals. There was a study done some years back, I think 2018, I don't remember. It said we require 20,000 clinical psychologists and we have 1,000. So can you see the gap? Okay, and that's for the clinical psychology. Think about school counseling, think about rehabilitation counseling, think about organizational counseling. So it's a very big area of, and sports psychology. I was, listening to the answers. When I researched, there was only one college in all over India giving sports psychology as a post-graduation, specialization. So, and we require it everywhere with all these things happening around IPL and all. We require sports psychology. So there's a dearth of professionals irrespective. Of course, there'll be, because of the population we require. So we have more and more people coming in this profession and taking it up, doing the course and helping, because we are not having many people already. We are much. In fact, psychiatrists also, for for every 2 lakh people, there's one psychiatrist. That's the equation. Can you imagine? Just imagine how it would be working, right? So I would encourage anybody interested to go and take it and help. Because post-pandemic, there is a mental health pandemic lurking, and everybody is just getting, overwhelmed with that. So the need is always going to be there.
Actually, this is one question here, which is about our, and I'm going to ask you this, and then I'll ask Anu, internationally at the Chicago. Do you find science students do better at psychology than humanities students? Is there a classic answer to this? So
if you ask me, I was a science student who did psychology, and I believe I did good. So for me, I've actually, very honestly, I do not really know. Okay, yes, the science background kind of helps, I feel, because it helped me a lot. So I can say it helped me, the science background, but I'm sure whether irrespective of the background, according to me, it's fine. But I'm sure Dr. Soni is there, or, Anu, they can give a better answer to this question.
Ashley, do you want to comment upon that, and I'll kind of come around?
Sure. I agree. I think it could be either way. I think it depends a lot on personal interests and background, specific background, not just what areas of study. I will say in like behavior analysis and behavior sciences, oftentimes that science background does help because you're coming from a place of trying to solve a problem, looking at data. We graph everything, we look at all of those data. And so a lot of times those who've already been interested in science, that is more of an area of psychology and behavioral health that really works for those individuals. However, I've also seen students who've come with fine arts background or liberal arts background or whatever, and have done, just as well in behavior analysis or in other areas of psychology. So I think it's really about finding what's going to be the most rewarding path. And I agree so much about, there's so often we look at counseling and clinical, and there's just so many other nuances and other career paths within that. And I think it's more about finding the best fit for that individual than it is about what particular discipline of study came before it.
Sonia, did you have anything specific to add about that? How, are you seeing more students, your science students, do well? Is there some trend that you're picking?
So not exactly. It's all about passions, and it's all about their calling. We've seen kids who even take psychology as a part of the liberal arts program and doing very well. It's about understanding why they want to do psychology. That's more important.
Interesting. There is one question about, and I don't know whether that's something we can take, but it's interesting what Nishika here talks about, law. And if you want to really pursue law, where does psychology come in? And I want to ask, this is quite an interesting, and I know Abhijit was touching on actually one particular case about oppression or whatever. Anybody wants to take a stab at an answer at that at all? If I want to practice law, and this, Nishika seems to have seen a connection somewhere between psychology and law. Is there at all?
So if I may go in, and then somebody who wants to add. Yes, please. So there are a lot of research studies, specifically in the area of memory, and where we study about false law and false memory. And so all that is related to when you study about jurisdiction. And because my students study that, and I've taught in my IB classes, one of the famous landmark research studies being Loftus and Palmer, where we're studying about how memories can be reconstructed you really realize that psychology is the underlying factor to a lot of jurisdictions being made. There is a very close connection. And I would say that even understanding the way the brain works, and specifically where the memory works, and how your thinking gets developed and your reasoning and rational aspects happen, they both are interwoven very beautifully. Rather, if you do that, you're already building on skills which will help you to be one of the masters of delivering yourself as a lawyer. So that's my opinion in a nutshell, and I'm sure the other eminent panelists could add into their bits.
Sure.
So can I go, Kala?
Sure, Parveen.
Yeah. So I think criminal psychology, in some universities, forensic psychology, a graduation or a postgraduate in that with law, captures whatever Dr. Soni said about it. So even if I have a criminal psychology background and I do law, or I do law and do criminal psychology, however the universities accept, that kind of helps. The difference, somebody, I read a question, somebody asked the difference. Well, I don't know the technicalities, but what I know is criminal psychology will capture criminal behavior, okay, how criminals behave, why do they behave like that. And a lot of law institutes across the world are researching on that, on a particular gene which causes people to be serial killers or whatever, like you said, with criminal with all the crime shows, people get interested. Forensic psychology is slightly bigger in its approach. You look at law, you look at other aspects, how it influences. So that can be one way of the combination of law and psychology, and with all the aspects which Dr. Soni said. So I think that's one way you can, and very interesting, would be very interesting. Somebody who's very investigative by nature, can really enjoy this profession, I feel.
Interesting. Anu, I'm going to ask, yes, anybody has a comment?
No, I was just going to say, with regards to law and psychology and forensic psychology, especially as was brought up, because I did my internship at CBI in Delhi in the forensic psychology wing. And that wasn't so much as law and psychology, it was more about law enforcement. So there is a difference here if you want to practice law, if you want to go into implementing laws, enforcing laws, or creating policies that would lead to becoming laws, right? But in each aspect, psychology plays an important role just because of the fact that we're dealing with human factors. If you know what the issues of this particular society, this economy, this place is, then that will help you be a better implement it in whichever way that you want. And as a lawyer, the general skills about trying to understand what people are feeling, how they would react to a particular statement, particular evidence, and how that should be presented is just general skills that can be useful.
Yes, Abhijit, you had a comment.
I just want to kind of break this down a little bit, and rather than focusing on careers, just kind of look at, as a psychologist, what are some of the key things that you learn if you're doing a psychology training? You learn about behaviors, you learn about emotions, you learn about cognitions or thoughts. Now, if you look at these three things, you will see that if you are able to understand these three things, they will be helpful in probably any kind of profession or interaction that you might have. And forget profession, they are helpful in your day-to-day lives. I mean, it makes you a better person, it makes you a better employer, it makes you a better parent. So it kind of intersects with all of your life. So I think the question about is psychology, or will learning psychology make me a better lawyer, will learning psychology make me a better salesperson, is superfluous. I think any profession which requires interactions with humans, any profession which requires understanding of human behaviors, emotions, and thoughts will definitely be enhanced if you have an understanding of psychology.
Very beautifully put, Abhijit. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, thank you. This is a question from a parent, Tanya Rao. Anu, I'm going to come to this bit because it seems slightly specific to us. So is there a structured way in which students are guided, in terms of, because they come with their own limited knowledge and interest levels. So is there a way in which how they are guided to, how do you pick the right choice of psychology or a subject, and what really happens around that guidance? Anu, so is that something you can shed light on?
That's an interesting question. And I'm afraid I don't have the complete answer for that, because when I was in school and when I was applying for psychology, I didn't have a career guidance. There was no school psychologist. There was no option for me but to sort of try and find something on the internet and stuff. But I think there is a huge aspect of what about psychology calls out to the student. And that is something that you will cover in the 3 years you do your undergraduate in India, at least. We cover a broad spectrum of the aspects of psychology, from social psychology to research and qualitative and quantitative and industrial and all of those aspects. So I think depending upon what interests you as a student, you can talk to the, I'm sure Dr. Sonia and Dr. Parveen know a lot more about the career guidance aspect of it. But just talking to your lecturers and talking to the faculty would lead to a lot more options if you know what you're interested in, rather than just saying, I'm interested in psychology for that kind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really what we do at Career One. Of course, the curriculum, as you said, is pretty broad. And what we do at the Career Service is also consistently bring in, and we have these interwoven activities. We bring in guest lectures and we give all of that. So, Ms. Tanya, really, it's, your child will get the opportunity to go through all of that. I've had students who currently, yesterday, one of my students got an internship with a company that she's going to work on regional content development. She is a psychology major and a literature minor. And it's an exciting combination that the company actually loved what she was actually bringing, because she came with that nuanced understanding, and she's actually going to work in regional content development. So these are some interesting interfaces that students do end up picking because they find that, that there's arts and psychology as well. And I know that one of those students is actually going to work on an international relations project on the arts front with that psychology background. So it's really interesting to see the different things that students do end up taking at career at the end of the second year. So it's I think the responsibility as educators and as our university is try and give as much information so the student gets across. And the important thing, as you've heard from all of them here, is also that the 3 years doesn't really define you, right? You can actually go and do so much more after. And sometimes students get so caught about deciding everything in these 3 years that they are. So I'm going to come to this final question, go around a little bit more, asking how flexible is this? Yes, Sonia.
Yeah, so Kala, just to your question, and just as a college counselor, I was itching to add to that point that the reason why there is suddenly been such a hike and surge of liberal art colleges in India is because of this, that it's time that parents realize that the next 3 years or your undergraduate years are not just about you making the final choice of your career, but that's the springboard for you to try and test out. So specifically for a parent, and of course, being a mother of a teenager myself, I'm worried about a career, but I think what's the need of the hour as a parent is to allow the kid to go into a college which is more of a liberal arts education, which will allow you to have those interwoven experiences, because you may be thinking about psychology, but your kid may end up being a social worker, which is also a base of psychology, or an anthropologist. I mean, I know of students who took psychology, but today they write their travel logs and they are cultural anthropologists. So, I think liberal arts, for that matter, a liberal arts university, in my opinion, is the need of the hour, because the kids need that experience of the springboard. Sorry, I wanted to add my bit as a college counselor, and I said it would be fair to do it to this question.
No, absolutely. Fair enough. Fair enough. I have one more question from Diksha Rao, which I think is quite good. Diksha, thanks for that question. Thanks for an earlier good one you posted. Abhijit, I want to ask you, this is about, can somebody in India practice both, pursue both practice and research?
Yes. But there are no very clear pathways to do that unless you are working within an institution, which is usually a government institution, let's say like the NIMHANS in Bangalore, etc., which does a lot of clinical research. But for example, in the UK or the US, you would have very clear pathways in which you would have protected time within which you do clinical work and you do research work. Whereas in India, you wouldn't have that kind of protected time in a pathways. So theoretically, yes, but it's difficult. So for example, my time is purely research these days. I do a little bit of honorary clinical work out of interest, and because it's difficult in India to kind of, considering the shortage of mental health professionals, difficult to say no to clients when they turn up. But most of my time is filled up with research and teaching. So there are certain opportunities within certain institutions, but the pathway is not as clear, and the protection of time for clinical and research work is not as good as it is in the West.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for putting that in. Anu, are you pursuing your research alongside practice? Do you think that's even possible? What's your thought?
So like Dr. Abhijit mentioned, when I was in the UK, there was specific time set aside, it was 40% teaching and 60% research in that perspective. And I'm trying to hold on to that because I love research. I love teaching, but I love the research work that I was doing. But there is no protected time. I'm working full time and then I go home and then I do my research. So, it's about how you handle your time now. And, like he mentioned very correctly, it's there's no clear-cut guidelines. You have to sort of do it out of your own incentive for that matter.
There's one final question there in terms of, does Kriya offer an internship in psychology? Yes, most definitely from the second year and third year. So we have this year quite a few. We work with Umeed, which is a child development center where we do a lot of work. Students do survey forms and case writing. There is internships with the SCARF, the Schizophrenia Research Foundation. They've taken about 7 interns this year from us. We do some work with the Banyan, with the Mental Health Leadership Academy. We have an ongoing project with the University of Oxford around mental health, and that's again an exciting space for students to work in. Empower, organizations like Empower, with Sangat, where we're beginning to look at a little bit more collaboration. So yes, clearly there are internships. Of course, there is lots of restrictions around what you can intern in psychology, because there's, that's how some of the privacy laws and confidentiality and all of that work. But as much as possible, we have pushed that. And I guess every one of our students who has been interested has managed to get a placement in either a pure psychology firm or related. Most of it is applied psychology. So they've managed to get into digital marketing firms and e-commerce and HR roles and all of that. So yes, there is all of that. So these are some experiences we hope that will also help students to understand, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? Because sometimes you come in and you're very excited about some of these things, but it's not until you get the brush with some of these things you think, oh God, am I going to be able to do this forever? And that, I guess that's something that we hope will help as well through your experience. So I think we kind of up there, and thank you so much. And we did address the bit about the government job in psychology and policy as well. So thank you so much, panel, for the Saturday afternoon. And Ashley, thanks for joining us on a morning from Chicago, and all of you. This is fantastic. As I said, this is such a big subject. We can just go on and on about each area, but there will always be questions, and we hope to continue some of these conversations, document them, but importantly, let's hope there's lots more students who take this up actively, and not for all the other reasons. Why is psychology underpaid? How can I make the big bucks with psychology? Maybe we have to look at this at something beyond.
You had those questions in the question panel.
Yes, there was.
Luxurious lifestyle and traveling the world. And I like those questions.
Yes. How can I make the big money with psychology? Why are psychologists underpaid? Yes, please.
I would like to travel more.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, please, if you have any book recommendations for young students, please do put that in the chat. That's always helpful. Kids will love to kind of read and hear. And we do kind of look forward to working with each one of you. We are working towards a fantastic collaboration with the Chicago School, and I hope to have that culminated very soon and have some great engagements with you all. Thank you, Sonia, for always being so wonderful and being a part and a great supporter of Kriya. Thanks for being there. Thanks, Parveen. Thank you, Abhijit, and look forward to meeting all of you again in one more around very soon. So feel free to put your books recommendations there.
Yeah, and I'm just going to jump in here. Yes, while you put your recommendations in the chat box, just a quick introduction. I'm Bhakti. I'm the Director of Outreach at Kriya. And I have to tell you, the last hour and a half has been a masterclass. I am a graduate in psychology myself, and I've been glued to my seat. It's been such a good learning experience. I can't imagine what the students must have taken away from this, and just the sheer number of questions that we've seen coming in. It's very heartening to see the kind of interest that exists in psychology. So thank you all for spending your Saturday afternoon with us, and we hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
So
Stay
much.
safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Kala and
Bye.
Bhakti.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, so thanks, Kala, and it's been, I think it's been a fantastic wrap to day one. What amazing conversations we've had. Kala, before you go, any thoughts? I mean, just tell us how you're feeling. It's been a whirlwind.
No, it's been amazing. Actually, it's been a whole day of all these. I enjoy these conversations, and every panel you're beginning to hear a little bit more and more about this whole thing about pushing that let's not talk about disciplines in silos, let's not look for. And I go back to thinking, what was I doing 3 years of studying micro and macroeconomics all my life, and what did I do? So it's kind of interesting. I think clearly, I think from what I'm hearing from industry, school, university, the direction that we are heading, whether that's the NEP or whether that's Kriyas or the Shivnadas or the Ashoka, whoever's put it out there, I think that's the right direction. And I really hope students and parents will start thinking and hearing some of these conversations, start thinking as well. As Abhijit today put it, he said one of the biggest disservice we've done is not teaching interdisciplinarity. And I hope that we will course correct very soon, and that's coming out very evidently. So if you're a parent, you're a student listening in, I don't think you should ever for once doubt about, am I going to do 3 years IT and get a job at the end of it? Am I going to be a better biologist by knowing sociology? Am I going to be a better environmentalist by knowing my data? Am I going to be a better psychologist by knowing my community? And I think that is probably the kind of question. It's not about, am I becoming a psychologist? Anybody can become a psychologist. Anybody can become an economist. But what's going to make you a better economist and better psychologist? And some of the comments that I'm hearing from the industry, the skills that they're asking for, I feel like a lot of what we are doing at Kriya or this kind of new wave of education is in its right place. And we have, I think, our heart in the right spot as well. So all the best to students and parents who are making, it's not an easy decision, but at least the point is, unlike a decade before where you've pushed into a degree and you're stuck with it and not knowing what to do, at least here you are coming out with a qualification that keeps you far more aware and far more competitive and far more, I guess, open to options out there than anything else. So great show.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, Parveen and Sonia, we're so lucky to have both of you. I think you're probably one of the best career counselors that this country has. And, I'm going to sort of pick your brains a little bit more, if you don't mind, a couple of questions coming your way. Are you open to that? Okay.
Yes.
Because these are questions that we've been seeing through the day. So before I ask you those couple of questions, just to let all the audiences know, we have a student panel discussion at 6:30. So all the subjects that we've covered today, right? Environmental studies, psychology, economics, and of course, sciences. We have students from Kriya who are currently pursuing these subjects as their majors, would come together at 6:30 and talk about their journey and why they chose those subjects. So it's going to be a student perspective. So do join us for that. So yes, the standard question that we're getting asked from parents is, how do I know what my child is good at? It's the age-old question. How do I discover what my child is good at? Would you like to take a stab at it, Parveen or Sonia?
See, when I started in 1999 with career counseling, there was a test, you would go and give it, and you would get a profile, and that was it, you know. But career counseling is much, much more than that. So a parent needs to understand. While you understand the skills of your child by giving him exposure to skills, talking about the skills, you understand the innate aptitude by the way the child is, the personality of the child, the interest areas. And see, children cannot pinpoint an interest. No child will say, I'll become a forensic psychologist in college. They can't say, they would not know. Maybe they would get very intrigued by the name. So, exploring career options with them. It cannot happen in one go. That's a very big myth. It can happen in a half an hour, 1 hour session. You give some tests and that's it. It cannot happen like that. It's to happen across years with the parent, working with the school counselor, if there is a career counselor in school, a career services cell, and gradually you pick up something. Like if I go to my journey only, Bhakti, I did psychology literally knowing I don't know what I want to do. Okay. I was lucky to get those opportunities with University of Texas, Young Buzz, Vidyartha, wherever I worked, and got that exposure. So, and I realized for myself, if I wouldn't have known this, I would have not. So, and secondly, for children or students you need to be open to exploration. I remember Dr. Waldron from Harvard, when he was training me, he said this very thing. He said, in India, we all do convergent choices and then decide to go divergent. The idea is you look at divergent choices and then come to a skill set which you are good at. So parents should encourage that. Like I'm very against this one very specialized degree which you take in graduation and then you're stuck with it. You don't know what to do with it. So I think exploration, understanding themselves, understanding the world of work. Sometimes they think of, okay, my child will do this because it's paying so much. Yes, the job is paying so much, but is your child fitting in the job? What if the child is unhappy? I mean, it's not matching the personality. So all these things need to be explored to make a informed and a fair career choice is what I feel in whatever years I've been working in this field.
Right. Sonia, just 1 second. Ashley, if you have to go, we completely understand. I know you're sort of wondering whether you should stay on, you should leave. It's totally your call. I'm sure you have things to do, but you're welcome to stay with us. So totally your call. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead, Sonia.
So I've been in this field for more than a decade, and I definitely feel very proud that I've been working with kids, not just on brands to enter, but to enter the best fit. And my mantra has been very simple and one word of caution. And for parents is that, please, as I said before, it's a process. It's not a product. You have to be a part of the journey. There are very many schools who don't have career guidance counselors, and that's the real scenario of the country. So let's face it, right? I am not a big advocate that my school kid goes out and gets a counseling from someone, because as much as my school kid is known by me and the teachers around, the outside agencies would not know that kid. And that's why we believe in working closely on every kid. Now, the question comes that if my school does not have a career counselor, how do I work? Parveen got in a very good point over here, saying that it's not about just being at that moment. It's about the entire journey. It's about the entire bandwidth. Okay, you cannot be getting an aptitude testing done. I'm not a big advocate of aptitude testing because it's a numerical aspect of you at that very moment.
Aptitude tests. And
I am somebody who hates numbers. Okay, I feel humans cannot be quantified, and so can the brain not be quantified. I'm more about passions and skills. One of the best career counselors in India is somebody who doesn't believe in a lot of aptitude testing. And I'm not talking about myself, but he's someone who says that career counseling is all about understanding your passions, your skills, having those conversations with your teachers. A, B, trying to understand who do you want to be like, would be a good idea to get started, and seeing the skills that the person may require. Am I really a good listener? right?
Sure.
If you think you are not a good listener, maybe it's a skill that you need to develop. Can I develop that skill?
Sure.
Definitely, I can't develop that skill. So I moving away. But as I said, I'm a huge fan of liberal arts education somehow. You will always hear that from me because it allows students to explore everything in the right spirit at the right time. And for parents, let me tell you, if your child is following the dream, the money is already his or hers. You have a problem when you put a child to wear somebody else's shoes and run a race. You've already lost the race before you've started, because Parveen, who works at Empower, which is a sister concern of Aditya Birla, we both work for the same parent company. We would very closely say that the number of cases we see in adults who are undergoing depression are also related to careers. The unhappiness of a career. As parents, every morning, we also don't like going to work, but still we enjoy our work while we are there. So if you want to enjoy your work, let the child follow the passion. There was a very interesting question by one of the parents who had put in that, how do we decide about our passions? And, is it easy to understand passions? Passion, according to me, and Parveen, please feel free to pitch in when you want to add something more valuable to the conversation. Passions are something which are an ongoing conversation for something that you love. Okay. My passion could be cooking, which is indicating that I would be moving towards culinary skills. I am not saying that all of you here need to be hiring a career counselor right after this meeting. At 6:30, we don't want to be making you make calls to career counselors, but I think a good idea is to learn to listen to your kid. Just a personal anecdote. I have a daughter who's in grade 10, and she says that I want to be a psychologist. And I, for a moment, was very happy that am I the role model for her? So she said, not at all. I like helping people. I want to be more towards giving back to people. But she said, I want to be in the field of therapy. So I understood that she had a rationale behind what she picked up. So, that rationale is very important. And if your child is confused, I'm happy, because that indicates that the child is ready to explore. I mean, at least the child is willing to explore and understand what has to be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bhakti, that's for me as a career counselor. Yeah.
No, I think just the passion with
and I think we are.
Yeah, I think just the passion with which you spoke about this. I mean, clearly the number of students and parents that you've counseled, it just comes through in what you're saying. And I think I would just go out there. I'm not a career counselor, but I've worked with career counselors all my career. And I can tell you that you are not alone, right? Every single doubt and dilemma and confusion that all of you face, everybody faces it. So, don't ever feel like, oh my God, am I the only one who doesn't know how to guide my child? Or am I the only one who doesn't know what my child is good at? These things will get figured out in time. With that, Parveen, I'll just quickly jump you on the point of psychometric assessments, because there's a lot of questions around psychometric assessments, right? Like we have Sonia, who thinks that aptitude testing is a little bit of a waste. But what's your, as someone who's developed psychometric?
But I never said that's a waste, but I said they can't be standalone parameters, A lot of parents will hold it like that and say, oh, it's pe ye aaya hai, that's it. Like, let's just freeze it off. So what I mean, if you have
Holy Grail, it's not gospel. So it's not like, basically what you're saying is, if an aptitude test result says you should get into engineering or a specific type of engineering, does not mean that's the whole truth. So Parveen, what's your take on this as someone who's developed psychometric assessments, especially let's talk about aptitude testing. And I know that you and I both subscribe to the thought of AIP, aptitude, interest, and personality. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So, what Dr. Sonia is saying, I always believed in this. So I worked 16, 17 years of my life as a career counselor. Now also, while I'm in mental health, I rush for a career counseling opportunity. So I feel if you use the right assessment, which measures your aptitude. And, I'm not of the believer that aptitudes are motivated passions. Somebody told me, what are aptitudes? They are motivated passions. What you're motivated about, you will have a passion for it, and that becomes your aptitude. So while a scientific assessment created by a psychometrician with the proper scientific reliability already done is one way of finding what you are good at, but the final answer is not on that. So the final answer will depend upon how you are exploring that career, what are your priorities, okay, what are your short-term, long-term goals, what kind of lifestyle you're wanting. So for example, I might be interested in healthcare and I might be interested in helping people, but that doesn't mean my aptitude is good in abstract reasoning, so I can become a doctor. It doesn't mean you cannot become a psychologist. It doesn't mean you cannot become a social worker. So even the way, what I don't vouch for is when people say we give you ready-made recommendations of tests. I'm not a believer of that. While I believe that you should have some, if you're completely clueless, my favorite category of student is who's clueless, because it means that they are ready to, work towards finding their answer. That's my favorite category. So the aptitude test helps them, or interest, personality, to kind of shortlist it to 4 or 5 things. But if an aptitude if a test is telling you, go to X career, Y university, this course, I would not believe that, because there's an underlying reason why they're saying that.
Absolutely.
So you need to not, and also aptitudes change.
Yeah,
so
they do.
Take a test in 8th, 9th standard, you're a different person in 12th standard. So you cannot, so while it can give you some direction, you need to go for counseling, and not only career counseling, also counseling in the university. You might be cut out for a forensic psychology course. What if you hate the university? You need to also like the university. You're going to spend 3-4 years over there. So it all has to come together. It just cannot be just the test. And also the kind of test. I am a big evaluator of all the tests available in the market. And not many are very good. Very few are actually the ones which have gone through the whole circle of the things to be done. So we need to be careful about, and I've seen parents do that, and that's not right. You use a report and come and tell the counselor, yeah, abhi isme likha hai. But that doesn't mean that child is, like for example, somebody who got low marks for whatever reason, and you deprive that student of science. Why?
Yeah.
That's not right. So you have to work with the student and all these things, and even consider academics. Yeah.
In fact, I also want to add to this that if students think that career decisions are only to be taken when you're in grade 12 or in college, you're so wrong. You're going to make decisions about your career for the rest of your life. You're constantly going to evaluate. It's a journey and it's never going to end. And enjoy it. Don't make it a point of stress. Because as you grow and as you evolve, as you understand yourself better, you are going to discover skills. You're going to grow skills. You're going to realize you had skills you never knew you had. And, as you progress in career, and I'm speaking from personal experience, and I know Parveen has gone through it. I know Sonia has evolved in her career, where we all realize that while interests might remain similar, but the way to manifest that interest in the form of a career could be different across different stages of your life. So don't assume that this is the only time of your life where you're going to have to make a career decision. It's going to happen again and again. Yeah.
Also, one more thing I want to tell the students, the lovely centennial generation who I like, that you are in such a lovely time. You have the option of choosing whatever you want to choose and do whatever you want to do. I remember talking to some very senior counselor from Harvard again. And, I said something, and he said, you can make a career of anything you like to do. Okay. So, and he said, you just pick up what you like to do and there will be a career path for that. So the thing is to find your passion and explore it. And like when I started, I was a one-on-one counselor, and my whole career has gone through so many changes. Right now, I manage a bunch of people and handle things and do collaboration. So it doesn't stick to one like Bhakti. I've seen Bhakti when she had come, and now what she's doing. So things can always, grow and in that same field. So you need to be, open and know and have knowledge about it. It's very important. You can't just randomly research on Google and that's the end of your knowledge. You need to go deep and understand the career, the requirements, and then make an informed choice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a trained broadcast journalist. And here I am in Kriya University leading their outreach. So you see, career trajectories are very interesting. And in fact, one of the things that is quite undermined, and Sonia, I want to get your views on this. One is, of course, the whole counseling approach and psychometric testing, etc. But I think one learns a lot from watching other people's career journeys. And
I was going to say that.
So why don't you weigh in on that, especially because you have the whole element of alumni.
So what I would, have a word, and I still see a lot of people, a lot of our participants there, maybe catch hold of someone who you see now is having a successful career. And for Gen Z, I know the success comes with a lot of money, right? So talk to somebody who you see having a lot of money and talk to them how many career changes have they had. Probably you'll see professionals who are making those bucks, which are impressive. They are the ones who've had at least 2 career changes. And sometimes it's good to say that I want to be jumping in and jumping out. And as Bhakti and Parveen said, and working with one of the best international schools of India, I would say that I've seen my alumni coming back to us and talking about it, saying that, hey, I had gone there to do this, but now I'm doing this. So you will be quite surprised that, and you have to understand that right now you are in school and your vision is limited because schools can only offer what the curriculum, the board approves of, right? But at the same time, all the schools have lovely extracurricular activities. Use that opportunity to explore your passions. Very often we think about drama just being an ability to go and deliver. But I often tell my students, drama and theater is not just about being able to deliver and your language. It also tells you about the various cultures. It tells you about being able to organize a team, give directions to a team. So use these extracurriculars as more of an understanding of your passion. The cliche ones looking into robotics, the maths. So I often tell my robotics, the kids who are interested in robotics, you'll find the ones who are doing maths and STEM going for robotics, but not a student who's doing psych. And I often encourage my students coming from a psychology background. I said, you know what? They need you the most to let the robot understand how to think. So that is what is more important. Please use every opportunity that you get in your school years and also what you'll get at Kriya. I'm sure a lot of us are here who are joining Kriya as the next home. Make sure that you are using every opportunity because maybe you're joining psychology and at the end of 2 years, you would be like, I think it's going to be my minor and my major has to be something else. That's absolutely fine. We're here to explore. And for parents, I think, especially for mothers, I see there are a lot of tigress moms who will always be hovering over deciding a career path. I think you are an experienced chef today, but when you started cooking years back, it was not so good as it is today. So give your kids a lot of experience and playground to make mistakes, be around so that blunders don't happen. Mistakes are fine. We can kind of correct them. We can't correct the blunders. So, and I think it's about a bond that you build in, where even in schools back, we hear parents saying that I want him to be doing the science. And I would conclude by saying just one thing. I'm a very firm believer that your child's career is his future, not your past. Let it be his future and not a playground of your past that you wanted to ever live.
Thank you, Sonia. I think that's amazing. And I just want to, you're welcome, Elsa, for that kind comment. I encourage Sonia and Parveen to read it. Parveen, I'd like to just, get your last comment on this. And again, I cannot tell you, I think we can go on with this conversation for the next couple of hours. I mean, that's how passionately we feel about career dialogues, literally. But I think, Parveen, you're parting short because this is a time of great uncertainty. I mean, unprecedented uncertainty, as if career decisions were not hard enough. And now here we have the pandemic. uncertain dates of exams. We don't know if kids are going to get there. Board results, we have no idea what's going to happen.
Bhakti, that's for you. Make your make your conditional offers as unconditional at this moment.
They are.
I mean, that's an advice of a college counselor to you. I'm going to be siding my students. Canada did that. Canada has overnight decided for the CBSE and ISC kids. Okay, I'm coming from international boards, so I'm not even talking about that at the moment. But for our national curriculums, don't keep them hanging there. Just make their conditional offers as an unconditional one. Come on, you've handpicked your kids based on something. So trust your choice.
Noted.
I'm sure I'll be hammered after this session by you, but I had to side the kids.
Noted, absolutely, Sonia. So Parveen, your quick parting shot on, what's your word of advice to parents and students on what should they do to manage stress right now?
So I'll just say one thing, couple of things. One, we are all in this together. You're not alone. So that's a given. Second, you have to take one day at a time. Too much planning, too much thinking, what is going to happen, it's not going to yield anything. So A, we are all in this. B, take one day at a time. You have made a decision for a course. Trust it. Let them live that course. Eventually, things will fall into place. We are a resilient generation right now, which is going through this phase 1, phase 2, I don't know how many phases of things. So just be resilient, which we all are. So just take one day at a time. Whatever decision you have taken, it will eventually work out. All the institutions, they are for the children. That is that's their customers. So they'll do everything in their control to make sure that, things go fine for them. And, if some months nothing happens also, in the bigger picture of things, it's not a big deal that nothing has happened. It doesn't matter. So we'll have to be patient. We'll have to take one day at a time and just believe that it's going to sort it out and things will go straight. That's what I can say. I cannot promise anything big because I don't know myself, but these things we can all do. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. And we also have some of our students who are joining us in now for the next panel. But so Sonia and Parveen, I cannot thank you enough for hanging on for another extra 30 minutes on a Saturday evening. It's always a pleasure, and I cannot wait to see the two of you again. And I think we need to do so many more of these, because if today is anything to go by, the number of students, the number of parents, the number of counselors and educators who've joined and who've sent such emotional messages on email and on LinkedIn and WhatsApp saying, why are we not having more such sessions? Why are we not doing more of these things? So as Kriya, we do promise that we will continue to have these conversations and having experts like Parveen and Sonia. Thank you so much. Please enjoy your evening.
Please take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay indoors. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
A complete pleasure, Bhakti. Thanks for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to serve the community I belong to, especially the students, because they keep me growing and keep me inspired to feel young, always in my heart and mind. So thanks so much, Bhakti. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Parveen.
Bye.